And we are back, and we are live once again on the Spin Cycle this Friday, August 28th. Andrew Southwick and RC Williams with you once again. Thanks to those of you checking us out right now live or stopping by for a few minutes, and to those of you who are watching us on demand on any of our platforms. And speaking of the platforms, RC, why don't you let everybody know where they can find
Oh,
us?
oh boy, my friend. Good afternoon. We are on one today. So, all things Watchmen Action, super easy. Start at Watchmen, that's WatchMen action.org. If you're looking for us on the social, super easy. Just type Watchmen Action into the search bar on any of the social media platforms. You will find Ezekiel the Lion and his smiling face. You can also see the spin cycle every weeknight, 9:30 Eastern, on the brand new 24/7 Watchmen Action Network. That's channel 40 on Beck Cable in the great state of North Dakota and streaming everywhere you might expect. All things Andrew Southwick, the spin cycle, Culture Crossroads, all that good stuff, including his awesome monologues. Go to YouTube. Look for Culture Crossroads 316. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can hear the truth without the spin.
All right. And we're going to get down to it. First thing I got to tell you, RC, I don't know if you've noticed, but this week I don't have the sunshine on my shoulders. Have you noticed that? Like I
I
got the
have I have
lighting.
noticed that, sir.
The lighting is controlled now, and hopefully I'm a little bit more in HD and everything. Yeah, it's amazing
Okay.
what a big swath of black felt will do. I have no windows anymore in my studio. That's a
You don't look like you're auditioning for the Bee Gees anymore, my friend.
you know what? And I would too. If Barry Gibb were here, I'd give it a try. I would
Because
sing
who
with him.
wouldn't? Who
I
wouldn't?
have yeah, I
Yeah,
have no
yeah,
problem doing that. That's fine.
yeah.
If he asked me today, I'm gone. You're doing the show on your own. I'm going to sing Staying Alive.
There it is.
Okay. All right. Well, conservatives are taking a victory lap today because a couple of days ago, Glenn Beck interviewed President Trump and he suggested, we're talking about the cattle shortage and the beef prices. And he suggested to President Trump, he being Glenn Beck, suggested to President Trump that maybe we need to loosen some of the reins on the big four meat packers and allow processors to process their own meat, sell it direct, and things like that. I asked Trent Loos, who's a sixth generation rancher and host of Trent on the Loose, and if anybody knows what he's talking about in terms of ranching and the things that are affecting cattle and beef and the beef supply today, it is Trent Loos, and that is not hyperbole. I've got him on the show on the Sunday show coming up this Sunday, but I want to bring a piece of that interview. Now, based off of the Glenn Beck interview, President Trump then released this on Truth Social, and where he said, ranchers and farmers have always been number one priority for me. They work very hard, they're smart, they're efficient, immaculately clean, but for years I have heard that they've had a tremendous problem with the big processors, who many say are a nasty monopoly. There are essentially four of them, a very non competitive number, and they make life miserable for our wonderful farmers and ranchers, and I can't let that happen, can I? So, in order to break this powerful monopoly with much of its ownership based outside the U.S., I am authorizing legal documents to be drawn in order to allow farmers and ranchers to be given the right to process their own food. This should move quickly. Thank you for attention to this matter. Now, that would seem like wisdom. It would seem like a win, but I want to play for you this interview I had with Trent Loos, and I asked him about this very thing before Trump came out with this. So, again, once again, we're giving you tomorrow's news 6 months ago. All right, that's what we're trying to do. But I want to let me share this tab and let me bring this up. Where here is when I asked Trent Loos about this specifically. Here's why we say, here's why he says this may not be the solution we think it is. Glenn Beck suggested that reducing the federal regulations so smaller producers can process more of their own beef instead of depending on, the giant meat packers. Trump seemed interested in that, but is that a realistic solution and would it actually help our cattle shortage problem?
So that's a great confusion that takes place. We sell beef, we sell pork direct to the consumer. It's not prohibited today. We do it every day. People all across this country do it every day. The problem comes in that you have, let's just take, for example, the numbers. January 1st, 2026, Tyson Foods was the largest beef processor in the United States. Since January 17th, 2026, They have eliminated 28,000 head of cattle from their processing systems every single day. 28,000 a day. So when you start talking about 28,000 head a day, and then you're looking at creating some more flexibility and looser rules, I don't know what looser rule you need to have to do what we're doing. We're doing it. We're making it work. There are hundreds of families across this country. The real issue is the volume. People don't grasp the amount of food that is produced in this country. I'll give you another little tidbit that ties into this indirectly. Because I was in Douglas, Arizona, and the border this week, I had many conversations about the border. I learned at Nogales, Arizona, which is the #1 produce port for bringing produce from Mexico into the United States. I'm talking about lettuce, I'm talking about tomatoes, I'm talking about anything you can name other than avocados. Because avocados are grown in other parts of Mexico, they don't come through that port. 1,800 semi loads of produce a day come through that port. 1,800. We've already got fruits and vegetables that is so dependent upon those imports coming in from other countries. What I'm fighting for is that we don't continue to have this reliance on other countries for beef. The federal government is the problem, but it's not in the regulatory system at the processor. It is the cost of producing the animals on the land. Just property tax alone makes it cost prohibitive if you're in the state of Nebraska.
Okay, so there you have it. The problem
Wow.
is not that we can't process, not that we can't sell these things, but that we have a cattle supply shortage. And I want to give you a couple of additional numbers on that. And again, the conservatives, especially in the online sphere, finally, President Trump is listening to us. He's striking a blow. He's doing the thing. Everybody's just falling in line. Yes, this is great. And look, I would love it to be great, but I'm not sure this does what we would like it to do. It's not going to bring prices down, and it's not going to help this. If we don't have a cattle supply, it doesn't matter what a processor can process if there's no cattle to process. Okay, that's the logic here, right? So here, and by the way, producers can already do this. You heard Trent Loos say we can already do this. This is not something new. Federally inspected beef can already be sold direct to consumers. It needs to be inspected by USDA or a state inspector, okay, and it can be sold commercially within the state. There is custom exempt livestock products. Those are different. They have to be marked not for sale, and they can't enter commercial chains. But there are legitimate reforms around inspection and small processor capacity and interstate commerce. But saying that farmers are simply being newly allowed to sell direct or newly allowed to do this that only the big four processors could do, that's an oversimplification, and really it's not true. We're already allowed to do this. The bigger problem, USDA reported 86.2 million cattle and calves on U.S. farms as of January 1st, 2026, including 27.6 million beef cows. The core affordability, is not how beef gets from processor to customer. We need a larger cattle supply. And as Trent Loos said, we're actually reducing our cattle supply, just one of the big four, by 28,000 heads per day. 28,000 per day. One other piece of this, and Trent Loos and I talked about this on the show as well. Again, I encourage you. It will air Sunday at 5 p.m. It's the opening segment of the show, and I'll post it online after the fact. But we also have incentives for grazing land to, instead of being used to graze cattle, it's being used for corn and soybeans. And the financial incentives are going that way for ranchers. And of course, if you're a rancher, it's hard to make it. It's hard to resist those subsidies because you need to put food on the table. You need to have your ranch open for business. And so you're going to undercut a lot of that grazing land and start growing corn and soybeans, and you're going to reduce your herd. Okay. Then we have the land that's being taken via eminent domain for solar and energy and things like that could otherwise be grazing land. And that's not to mention the data centers, which are taking over a lot of our rural lands. And there's a good portion of that land that is also grazable. If we take out all of our grazing land, what cattle are we going to have? They have nothing. Cattle need to graze, right? So if we're not going to allow them to graze, and if we are going to be reducing our head every day, but yet we're loosening rules so that meat processors can process, well, that's great. I'm all for it. In fact, 2 years ago at least, on Culture Crossroads, I interviewed Trent Loos. And I said, Trent, we don't have enough meat processors because we need meat processors in small communities so that we don't have to just go to Walmart and buy Tyson or whatever else, that we can go, around the block or down the street or 20 minutes down the road to our local meat processor. And I said the vertical integration of our meat processing is a danger because you're going to see food supply shutoffs, and you could have real issues with hunger in America. So yeah, I'm absolutely sensitive to there being more meat processors, and I'm not going to pretend I'm a rancher, so I don't want to get out over my skis, but I'm just relaying to you what I have learned and bringing you this information from a sixth-gen rancher whose living depends on ranching.
Right.
And before we start, as conservatives, taking a victory lap and saying, oh, President Trump, listen to us, I think we need to also remember, look, it's a midterm season. President Trump is doing what President Trump does. What's the low-hanging, easy fruit that will make a good headline? I know that sounds cynical, but that's what he's been doing in Trump 2.0. What'll make a good headline, and the base will get jazzed up about it, and I'll get a bunch of press, and the X sphere will go crazy, and Facebook and Truth Social, and they'll love it. It won't solve the problem. It doesn't remove the subsidies from where they are. It doesn't redirect them, I should say, or remove them, because the money's going to flow where the money's going to flow. So it really doesn't change the flow of the money. It does open maybe a little bit up. Maybe, if you can sell it by the cut, I don't know. We'll have to see what the plan actually is. But before we take this victory lap, we need to really look at, wait a minute, are we really addressing the problem? Or did we get something that Trump saw an opportunity because he was on Glenn Beck to do something Glenn Beck suggested he do? Now, Glenn Beck could go brag about it. Glenn Beck listeners can brag about it. Online influencers can brag about it. But it doesn't solve the cattle supply issue, which is the real undergirding problem.
So, Andrew, what you just said, I think, is really the basis for people to understand. So, great, all the hyperbole, whatever, Glenn Beck, some kind of hero. I don't really care. I don't really care about most of these people anymore. You just get to the point where you're so frustrated with the talking and not enough of the action. Speaking of that, it seems, Andrew, from us on election night, talking about the importance of codifying things into law, that seems to carry over to this almost disease that we have of not actually getting to the root of and solving the root of the problem. Here is another example. Trent Loos, obviously a sixth-generation rancher, is going to know better than most, including the sitting president of the United States, what the root issue is, which he accurately described, by the way. This is the equivalent of you forgetting to flush your toilet, and it's got stuff in it, right? And instead of actually flushing it, you just go in every so often and you spray a little bit. It may smell better for a minute. It may be functional, but boy, when you open the top, man, you're going to get a whiff, right? Because you're not addressing the root issue. And so here we are again. And my concern is that we're not going to address the root issue at all. This isn't just cover to allow some things to move until we can address the root issue. It seems like another data center or eminent domain or whatever the case may be is more important than actually eating or us being able to supply ourselves. I was shocked to hear what he said about Nogales. I did not realize 1,800 trucks a day were coming in with produce from Mexico. One bad instance or a combination of bad things in some form, and it feels like our entire food supply just gets completely choked off. And if we have to turn inward, the United States is kind of where it was during World War II, when all of a sudden it had to ramp up production. Most people forget that it took a couple of years and a series of miracles, divine intervention, for us to actually be able to do what we needed to do. Andrew, I fear that we don't have the fortitude to get there again. Not because of the lack of fortitude from guys like Trent Loos, because I think he'd do the job along with a bunch of others, but our own government would almost be in the way. It's scary to think that we live in a world where just dressing over the issue is okay for whatever reason, when if you actually took the time to solve the problem, we wouldn't have it. Who'd have thunk?
Mm-hmm. You know, I also, well, I'm going to shut up here because we got other stories to do. Um, Speaking of low-hanging fruit and trying to go back and rebrand and convince you that what's happening is great. Um, no, I'm going to say it. Shoot it, whatever. We are. It's like we are in an abusive relationship with our leaders.
Mm.
And the second they bring us flowers, we get so excited and glad. Now they've changed, and now they're finally hearing us, and we finally made a breakthrough. But it's so fleeting and so temporary. And I don't say that in a light-hearted way or to make a light of abuse of any kind, but it's a very similar cycle. We backstab you. We are. I mean, it's these policies overall, DC policies, not Republican only, not Trump only, not Democrat only. It's our DC policies that are reducing our purchasing power. It's our DC policies that are making us more dependent on foreign everything. And you look, I asked Trent, when do we reach the point where we are dependent on imports for our food? And Trent's like, we're already there. That was
Wow.
one of the reasons why I brought up Nogales. We are dependent on foreign food for our produce, and we are now dependent on foreign food for our meat. That's a bad place to be. We're dependent on China for our medication. We're dependent on other regions for the oil that we consume, and that's actually what we're going to talk about here in the next story. Hey, Philip David, I hope you are doing well also. Thanks for checking us out. Appreciate you stopping by. I want to bring up another clip here. This is from CNN, and I got to tell you, we're in the twilight zone, my friend. We're in the twilight zone. Because again, what we've talked about, some of the things that we've been critical of this administration. Listen, you and I both, we want to support President Trump. We do. I'm a 3-time Trump voter. I want to, but I am not going to spin actions from the executive or from our Congress or from the Senate. I'm not going to spin it into something good if I don't think it's good for our country. And I'm going to tell the truth, even if it's my side.
Yep.
And that does not make us friends in the conservative media sphere, which is why we need your support, like in the channels, commenting, so on and so forth. It's not because it's not a vanity project. We want the best for America, whether Americans agree with us or not. Anyway, CNN actually made sense in this segment. That's what I'm saying. It's an upside down world. They made sense. It was a round table, and of course, everybody was shooting their fire at Scott Jennings, right?
Yes.
Republican firebrand. Okay. Now, I'm going to play this for you here. They're talking about the Strait of Hormuz and oil, and why hasn't the price of oil gone down? Because remember, by the way, this was all about stopping Iran from having a nuclear weapon that they didn't have, that we said they couldn't get, that they did have, that they were days away from getting, that only we could get, that we've obliterated, but they can still get it. So we have to stop them from getting the weapon they don't have and can't get, that only we can get. But just in case they get it, we got to stop them. Well, now it's the Strait of Hormuz, right? And the Strait of Hormuz was open in February. And it's been closed since then. We control it, but we still have to negotiate with Iran to be able to use it. So that's an interesting form of control. But nonetheless, we are wondering, well, if we have all this control and we've won 487 times, why aren't the prices going down at the pump? Here is that exchange.
And that is not what.
Well, I'm just curious, when you say this isn't what I thought winning would look like,
winning
what
looks
did you think it would look like?
Scott.
Winning looks
only
like
thing
no new
before
wars
that-
like Trump.
Let me let Josh respond.
Just that, I'm curious.
Before we started this war, the only thing that was in between us and what we wanted was Iran not having nuclear weapons with a set of successful negotiations. That is what is between us and them not having nuclear weapons.
No,
now.
we don't need successful
before we start. But yeah, we do.
We don't need successful negotiations.
The Strait of Hormuz
Okay.
was not closed before this war started.
Not
Like
closed
Abby
now.
said, 170 oil tankers were going through there
Not
every
closed
single
right
day.
now.
Yes. Why are only 10 going through, Scott? And listen,
We have escorted 750
Scott,
million
Scott,
barrels of oil through the
Actually, I
Strait.
do want you to actually answer that question, because this is just emblematic of like a broader glossing over of reality. If you're claiming the Strait of Hormuz is open, why are there only 10 tankers coming through the strait now.
Well, first of all, I'm not claiming it. Brad Cooper, the commander of CENTCOM,
Sure.
is talking
if
about it.
you
That's-
and the administration, the
not my fault.
president is also claiming it, why are there only 10 tankers coming out of the strait right now?
Well, there's tankers going through at the escort of the United States Navy. 750 million barrels of oil.
I know,
have
but
come
you're not
through.
answering my question. It used to be 110 a day. Now it's 10.
We don't need
So
as many
if
to go
it's-
through right
so
now.
if we
We're-
don't
we
need
don't need it.
So tell that to the American
question
people
is
who are
why
paying
not?
record high gas prices for
But it
August.
is a small fraction of what it was before. Is that not emblematic
Well,
of a Strait of
I mean, I'll
Hormuz
give
that
you-
is not
I'll give you
impactful?
a strategic reason why ultimately it doesn't matter, because we have figured out how to move oil out of the region.
So
Let
then
me
why
finish.
haven't gas prices gone down, Scott? You just said it doesn't matter.
So we have figured out how to move oil out of the region, not entirely through the Strait of Hormuz.
Now we
is
can
number
get oil
one.
without Hormuz.
And so we have basically taken away the strategic advantage of.
There's no
Okay,
advantage
but
anymore.
gas prices are still elevated in this country as a result of the war.
Yeah.
So what you're saying
gas prices
and the
will eventually
reality
come
that
down.
They'll come down
Americans are
eventually.
living with are not the
Inflation is transitory.
They're
Or
eventually
not.
going to come down, just like
Eventually-
Trump said this war would
eventually
only
gas
last 4 to
prices
5
will
weeks,
come
and now
down.
it's dragged on for nearly 7 months.
And all of this is happening at the same time that we produce enough oil to make ourselves energy independent.
Okay.
Scott, that's not
apart
the
from what's
gas-
happening
gas
in the
is
Middle
a-
East.
And now we're energy independent. Okay, I want to walk through some of these because there were several different answers there, and none of them can exist in the same universe. All right, unless we are literally in a multiverse right now, which maybe we are. Maybe we are. I'm not really sure. But okay, so Hormuz is still far below normal. Recent reporting in terms of the oil going through. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at my phone. My printer is broken today. Otherwise, I could look more at the camera when I read this stuff. So thank you for bearing with me. Recent reporting put visible commercial or commodity vessel traffic through Hormuz at a fraction of the pre-war levels. The administration says protected corridors, or excuse me, I skipped that. Different trackers produce different counts, but especially because some tankers may travel dark, quote unquote, that is with their transponders off. But the broad conclusion is not disputed. Normal traffic has not returned. So the first defense was, well, we found another way to move the oil. The administration says protected corridors, alternative pipelines, and other arrangements are moving substantial oil despite the disruption. Okay, but then the consumer question then is going to follow. If the workaround has substantially solved the oil flow problem, why have gas prices remained elevated to where they are now at about $4.09 a gallon nationally? At least that's what it was about an hour ago in America. Well, the defense number two, America is energy independent. Well, what does that mean? Okay. The United States is a net energy exporter. All right. And that's not the same thing as consuming American oil only or being insulated from global crude prices. The U.S. still imports petroleum, including crude grades that many domestic refineries are designed to process while exporting other crude. So America can simultaneously produce these quantities of oil at enormous rates and remain exposed to world prices. Energy independence in political usage usually means that we're net exporters. It doesn't mean that we are using the oil. That's the word trick there. Because when we hear energy independence, you and me, the voter, we think we're using our own oil. We think we're fracking and we're doing the things that we're supposed to do. We think Keystone Pipeline, this is for us. That's not what it means. It means we're a net exporter. It means we export more than we import, okay? That's why the instability in the Persian Gulf can still affect our gas prices, even during record or near record U.S. production. We have to separate these things. This is why we bring you the context. I know we're a little bit in the weeds, it's a little bit nerdy, but bear with me here for a second. Here's the central contradiction, RC, and I want to get your comments. If Hormuz is no longer a major problem because alternative routes are not working, then where is the price relief, right? If America is truly independent of foreign oil disruption, why would the war in the Persian Gulf materially affect the pump prices? If Hormuz is still strategically vital enough to require U.S. military protection, then America is plainly not economically indifferent to Hormuz, and the administration cannot use energy independence to minimize foreign dependence on oil while simultaneously using Hormuz's importance to justify the continued war. It's baffling. It's back and forth.
That was a very "Where is Mitch McConnell" series of answers from Scott Jennings. Now, if you're not hip to that, Scott Jennings came out and said he had talked to Mitch McConnell and Mitch was fine. Nobody's seen Mitch in probably 2 months now. So a lot of people raked him over the coals because he gave that type of answer. I'm watching it. You may have seen me cover my eyes because I'm like, I can't watch this anymore. It's so cringe that I'm having a hard time with it. If there is a national security question you can't answer, which is in part where I think Scott Jennings was going, he just didn't express it. Like if you're doing something with dark vessels or whatever, and that's a national security concern, I can understand why you would not mention that on the air. But as a professional, and I've interviewed Scott Jennings, okay? He knows his stuff. At least I thought he did. You have to be prepared to deal with something like that. And at least give an answer that is coherent enough that the people who are on the set with you, which you know are not fans of the administration, don't completely shred you and back you into a corner where you're just kind of the babbling brook. Like you said, oh, we're energy independent. Well, great. Where does relief come from? You could have put a time frame on it and said, look, fuel prices are generally 2 to 4 months behind because people have to buy in advance. So you're not going to see that for a minute, but we got it figured out. People would have said, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, that makes sense to me. No answer that was coherent there. We found a different route for the oil. And without giving up national security concerns, you could have simply said, this involves multiple coalition partners ensuring that the Strait of Hormuz is no longer an issue for us or the rest of the world. Everybody had been like, whoa, that's awesome. And if they asked you another question, you said, listen, there's some national security stuff here. I can't get into all the details because we're not going to triangulate for our enemy, but understand that things are working. Andrew, what I can't figure out is if someone like me, who is a media professional, but is not on national news because we don't get Christmas cards anymore, can answer that simply off the cuff without a problem. Why is it that Scott Jennings, who does this every single day and hosts a syndicated radio show, could not provide simple, coherent answers to shut that down? I don't quite know what to do here.
Yeah, I mean, but that's just it. See, we say energy independent, but what we mean is we export more than we import. Has nothing to do with what we use. We say that we are independent in terms of, okay, we say that we're independent in terms of our food supply, except we have to import from Argentina, Mexico, Brazil, all these other places for produce and our meat. We say that we are leading the world in our healthcare, yet we're dependent on China for our medication. We say that, well, the problem is vertical integration in meat processing, when really the problem is we're losing 28,000 head of cattle per day. We're not going to have cattle to process if it keeps going like that. You can't reduce past zero, and we're getting there fast. And then the land we would use to be more independent when it comes to meat or cattle, like we talked about in the first segment, we're now taking that for data centers and solar and corn and soybeans, and we're offering subsidies and tax breaks and all the government incentives to do all of that, but not the thing we actually want to do. That's what's frustrating. I think that's what's frustrating most Americans, and I think that's what frustrates most Americans about every administration that comes in. This is not just a Trump problem. He's just the latest grifter in here who's doing it. All right? It's a DC problem. And it's how the game works, and that's why you could send a good person in there, but the system is not set up to work, I guess, for yours and my benefit.
Andrew, it's almost like we have a mission accomplished-itis because Bush used the same foolishness when the mission was far from accomplished, and it cost us about 20 years of time, effort, energy, lives, and everything else. And here we are again, mission accomplished in Iran, except what mission was actually accomplished, unless destabilization in such a way that you don't get anything out of it, was actually on the menu. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again quickly, is this goes back to CPAC and the world famous War Room with Steve Bannon segment, where it was the fastest we got to go to break I've ever seen in my entire life, because all of these things are what I said back then. And I am amazed that in that time, because it was March April, May, June, July, August. So 6 months. 6 months now. We're kind of in the same boat, and there still isn't a clear or coherent answer as to what the Hades is going on with this situation. And the absolute best we can do when you're, quote unquote, in the enemy's den and you have an opportunity to shut them down.
Oh, sorry. You froze again. You said shut them down. I know you'll come right back. Well, RC will be right back in just a second. But look, what you're talking about is exactly right. If we have an opportunity to knock these people out, why don't we? We stand around and pussyfoot and go back and forth, but we don't actually solve the problem. We don't actually get to the root of the problem. It's the same with our beef shortage issue in America. It's the same with our oil in America. And RCSC, you're back now. I think you're back anyway. Go ahead. You were talking about you need to shut them down. Continue from there.
So you have this opportunity to shut them down when you're on, talking about Scott Jennings and CNN, and the best you can do is sound like a dithering idiot, right? You sound like Joe Biden. Sorry, not sorry. You sound like Joe Biden when you're doing stuff like that. And again, our 3-year-old grandson, Aiden, could have done a better job in that situation. And he is not informed at all beyond where are his toys, and he wants to hang out and be on camera on Culture Crossroads occasionally, Andrew. But he would have done a better job with that situation. I am somewhere between disappointed, sad, and ticked off at us even having to watch and analyze these things. Now, we do it because people need to have an understanding, but my goodness, I said this the other day, and I know we're not going to cover the story today, but the ATF gets ransomware. They want like $2 billion. Every gun owner in the United States, their information is now being held hostage. Please stop the ride. I want to get off. Maybe you can drop me off at the Lake of America exit. This just stacks on top of that. Please stop the ride. I want to get off.
And that, and that's great. That leads us to what'll be our last story for today. It's not really a story. We're just going to end with it because it's a collective sigh. All these things are going on, and you have Trump renaming Lake Ontario Lake of America. Okay, you know what? The minute he did that, do you know what happened to my purchasing power? Nothing. The minute Lake Ontario, finally we got it out of those evil Canadians. Oh my gosh, the Canucks themselves, the Maple Leafs. Oh, we can't have it. Now it's Lake of America. Everything is better again. Do you know what happened? When the moment his pen struck and it was the Lake of America, I went down to get gas, and would you believe it? It was still over $4 a gallon. Huh.
Like magic fairy dust, yes.
We're going grocery shopping, but now that it's Lake of America, I am sure that prices have come right down, just fallen down. But in that, as he did that, and I'll say to put the energy, tie a button on our energy conversation, maybe America does produce enough energy to put to be able to say energy independent right on a campaign graphic. But if a ship cannot get through a 21-mile wide strait on the other side of the planet, and then suddenly my gasoline costs more because of that, I really need you to explain to me what exactly I'm independent of. Like I just...
Apparently your purchasing power, Andrew.
Yeah, that's certainly independent of me. But don't worry, because Truth Social, Donald Trump, greatest president ever, according to Donald Trump. It is interesting. You know what's dumb about this? I don't know.
I think he was trolling here, Andrew, but it was a really bad troll.
Who was he trolling?
I have no idea. This is an old picture, apparently, the way that I understand it.
Is
And
it?
Maybe I go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is not a national issue. I think it's just dumb. But if he's trolling, who is he trolling? What's the troll here? Reagan isn't on here. I don't think JFK is either. I'm not sure, but if you're going
if I'm not mistaken, did Silent Cal did he have him under average? Like Calvin Coolidge was the epitome of what you would want a president to be. And if I'm looking at this correctly, now mind you, folks, I've been studying presidents since the second grade. So I have an understanding. I have a pretty good understanding of this. I see that Andrew Johnson is on the average list.
Mhm.
I don't know in what world Andrew Johnson manages to make any average list on the rankings of presidents when historically, consistently across the board, regardless of party, regardless of leaning, Andrew Johnson is historically ranked as one of the worst presidents in history because, amongst other things, of his failure with Reconstruction. I,
Mhm.
I mean, look, Ulysses S. Grant, for whatever it's worth, yes, there are some qualities that can't be redeemed, but in fairness to him, some of the work that he did, you'd probably at least have him in the average category.
Well, and then you have in the great category FDR and Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, a racist, and evil man to the core. One of the reasons why we have the United Nations, a globalist. He ushered in the progressive era at the turn of the 20th century. Evil, not great. That's a failure.
Come on, man.
FDR with the New Deal. So he is the progressives' standard bearer. He's their greatest president. Everybody wants to be just like him. He ushered in a lot of the progressive nonsense and a lot of the welfare state that we have today. That's a failure. So why you would list them next to a Lincoln or a Washington is beyond me. And again,
John Adams is near great.
and Coolidge, he has us below average there.
Unbelievable.
I mean, he's got Biden in the right place. He was a failure, but Biden, we know he wasn't even really the president. It was probably Obama's third term. Carter, yeah, that's a failure. I'm with that. Harding, but yeah, but again, where's Kennedy on here? Where's Reagan, for example? I don't see. Do we see the Bushes anywhere? I don't see the Bushes either one. It seems to be you're missing quite a bit of the late 20th century. Ooh, and Nixon, where is he? Where's he at? He wasn't all good, but he wasn't all bad. We're missing a lot of people.
That's true.
How about LBJ? Is he on here? 60s?
No, I mean, and I would think that he'd be in the POS category, but apparently he didn't make the list either.
Do we see Truman anywhere?
No.
We don't see. How about Eisenhower?
Oh, geez, I like Ike. What happened here?
Okay, here's what we need to know. This is the most important thing about this, okay? It's dumb, but whoever put this out, and I mean, that came out on Trump Social, so he did post it. He's got to know. I just rattled off like half the presidents of the 20th century, and they're not on here.
Yeah.
Does that mean that President Trump doesn't know that those people were president in the 20th century, i.e. presidents in his lifetime? Or was this made by a staffer and he just put it up because he wasn't paying attention? Like, either way, it's not great, but I think we need to redo the ranking of presidents here. And let's wait a second to call him great. I am willing to let time and history shake some things out, and we might look back at a couple of things and say, oh, there was some wisdom in that, even if I don't see it today, because we don't see a lot of relief today. But for crying out loud, to say you're the greatest now, if you are saying that, nah. If you're trolling, just tell me who you're trolling so I can be in on the joke, because
Please.
that list is clearly, if not, then the list is the joke. I don't know what else. Anyway, all right, RC, I was going to talk about Pennsylvania and measles, but we don't have time, and we'll get some more info. We'll bring that back. But there's a whole lot of lying and shenanigans and misinformation going on there. We'll keep an eye on the Clancy case next week as that unfolds. We'll see what the jury says. Hopefully, we'll get some clarity on that. The ATF, we got to follow up on that story. And of course, it's the weekend, so the government's going to be shut down. I hope everybody will be okay. I hope you can survive this upcoming government shutdown that we're going to have for 48 hours. You know what that means? It's going to be a pretty good weekend. I'll tell you.
Yes, amen.
It's going to be a
Yes
good
and
weekend.
amen.
All right. RC, anything else that you want to bring up real quick that we need to know before we go?
I am glad that we continue to inform people, Andrew, but I have to tell you, you just, when you think it can't get any more ridiculous, Uncle Ridiculous shows up at the door and says, look at my new ridiculous shirt and my new ridiculous hat, and let me show you how much more ridiculous I can be. That said, we are doing our public service, and we are not Morions, sir.
No, we are not. But we do live in Dumb and Dumber, where we will trade a van for an 80cc scooter.
There you go.
And totally redeem ourselves. All right. Yes. Join the Morion Club. That is who we are here at the Spin Cycle, where we welcome all. All right, for S.C. Williams, I'm Andrew Southwick. Thank you again for being with us. Remember, please, Big Three, like, share, subscribe, whatever platform you're viewing this on, whether you're viewing live or on demand. Helps the show grow. It lets the algorithms know this is something people want to see. And again, whether you agree with our worldview or not, that's okay. We just want to bring the truth to these and context to these stories, and you can put that through your own filter, as we do. But we appreciate you spending some time with us every day here on the Spin Cycle. Yeah, government shutdown. Looking forward to that. 48 hours, and we'll see you again on Monday.